Verdantas is a successful integrated science, engineering, and consulting firm, and its origin was very interesting. They took 5 firms of similar size and brought them together. Well, in today's episode of the Civil Engineering CEO, I have with me Jesse Kropelnicki, the CEO of Verdantas. And Jesse talks about how Verdantas was built by taking this innovative approach. Jesse has also been successful in building a world-class endurance business and is a triathlete himself. So he also offers some leadership advice for engineers based on his experience as a CEO of an engineering firm, but also his triathlete experiences. This is an awesome episode to help you grow as an engineering leader. Let's jump right in. All right, now I'd like to welcome our guest onto the show for today. Jesse Kropelnicki is the CEO at Verdantas. Jesse, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. Super excited to have a chat today.
So just to kind of set us up here, Jesse, maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit about Verdantas and then, kind of how you got to Verdantas into your role. Just give us like the high-level overview of the two, how you came together.
Sure, no problem at all. So Verdantas was started almost exactly 4 years ago by the original private equity partner that we had called Roundtable Capital. And they had a thesis around an environmental services firm that would have an impact on a better tomorrow, or creating a better tomorrow, probably better said, and taking advantage of certain tailwinds in the marketplace, tailwinds such as climate change, and the need for engineers and scientists to build resilient infrastructure. Also better control climate change over time through things like renewable energy, grid resilience, and electrification. Also the need for more common brownfield redevelopment, meaning land that is being redeveloped for future purposes from what it had been historically, usually needs some level of remediation work to be able to do so. A lot of these things are tailwinds that are going to be there in the world, that very, very resilient for the forthcoming, decade or two. So in the private equity world, they call that a thesis. And that was really the thesis that RTC had 4 years ago. So to answer your question directly on how it really got started after coming up with the idea, there was the acquisition of what we call kind of the founding 5 companies at Verdantas that were acquired in a short period of time. And created a decent amount of critical mass through something that RTC called collaborative peers, meaning we acquired similar sized firms such that they can all come together and try to put their heads together on how they can create something differentiated in the marketplace and evolve into what is now Verdantas, right? A lot of private equity teams start with one big company, which provides a lot of the system structure and sometimes the people to run a larger company in the future and then do smaller acquisitions as add-ons. But their approach was, again, collaborative peers where you acquire similar size companies, which I think is really important to even who we are today and makes us a bit differentiated in the way our culture was developed, because everyone comes to Verdantas kind of in the same shoes. Not one firm is bigger or better and so on and so forth. It's like-minded individuals and entrepreneurs that have come together, and we take the best practices possible from all of them, put it together and create Verdantas, right? To put it very simple.
That's wild. That's interesting. I mean, like you said, you see so many times where a larger firm starts acquiring small firms at a certain point in their growth period where they feel like that's the only way that they can grow. And this was very interesting that you took a bunch of like-sized firms from together, brought them together. And we'll talk more about that. But before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about your own background, Jesse, your career, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. I started as a structural engineer, and pretty quickly early in my structural engineering career, I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. There was something about it I really liked. I also knew I wanted to be in leadership. But when you're 2 years into your career, 3 years into your career, the timeline to get to any of those types of roles is pretty long, right? So I was fortunate in that I was also very passionate about triathlon during the late 90s and early 2000s, and had some good success with myself, my own racing at an amateur level, but started to have folks, mostly friends and family initially, that said, hey, you seem to be really good at this triathlon thing. You think you could help me with it? So I started to develop all these being an engineer and loving spreadsheets, right? created all these mathematical models around sports psychology, sports physiology, sports nutrition, race fueling, you name it. Triathlon's a very complex sport. So I started to utilize those protocols, and the athletes I was then starting to coach nights and weekends. Now they call it a side hustle, right? Just wanted to make a couple extra bucks and potentially start a family and buy a house. And what started as just the side hustle on nights and weekends really just took off. Before I knew it, I had more inquiries for the coaching services than I could handle. Had to bring on other coaches, train them in the protocols, set up a real business entity, started offering health insurance, 401k. You go through that whole evolution, which is a tremendous learning process. But by 2008, it was more than a full-time gig. We had become one of the largest in the world that provides those types of services to Ironman athletes. Me personally, I was coaching 15 professional athletes for about 10 or 12 years in there. And I kind of stopped engineering altogether because I thought, wow, this is just an amazing opportunity to be an entrepreneur and in a leadership role, and gravitated towards that. Always figured I could come back to the engineering world if and when I had the opportunity. And it was a wild ride because working with professional athletes is not an easy thing to do. You learn a lot about different types of human beings, how to connect with them, and just generally try to be a bit better every day. We were fortunate in that I had over 30 Ironman champions over the years in there, multiple top 10 finishes in Hawaii, which is the Ironman World Championships for those that have seen it on TV. And ultimately got to around 2018, and it turns out coaching professional athletes is quite stressful and emotionally draining for those that haven't experienced it, and kind of needed a change. And I was fortunate in that WSP then came back to me and said, hey, can you come back and maybe help us with some organizational health in our national power team? And I said, well, that's what I really enjoy doing. I think I could help. I'll try it on a part-time basis. One thing led to another. I ended up coming back full-time. I ran the national power team at WSP for a period of time, took on other roles over the period of about 4 years after that. And then Verdantas came along about 2 years ago as this really interesting opportunity that was a blend of my two worlds, right? I was part of a very large public company with WSP, 65,000 plus people. You learn a lot about how to organize things, how to structure things at that level of scale, but also was an entrepreneur. And when Verdantas came along, I realized that, hey, this may be the perfect blend for me to leverage a lot of my capabilities, and thought that I could really have an impact where, hey, it's just so critical that we build trust between new teams that join our company, which happens pretty rapidly, fortunately for us. And I could really leverage those skills and try to build something that's really differentiated in the marketplace, mostly in terms of culture, but also in the services we provide. So I initially joined as COO 2 years ago. About a year ago, I transitioned from our prior CEO, Jerry Salantai, into the CEO role. I was able to hire in a new COO, Rebecca Ashton, who I'd worked with actually in my prior life, and also a new CSO, Ashraf Shahanger, who came to us from Kleinfelder, and we were able to build out just a really great executive team.
That's great. That's really interesting. And, you know, what Verdantas has done here is very interesting, and I've seen quite a few talks about it and read up about it, because it is interesting where you're taking these different firms of the same sizes and bringing them together. And one of the questions, before we get into that culture a little bit, one of the questions I have for you about leadership and leadership styles, you know, I know in the engineering world, we get reached out to by a lot of engineers saying, you know, I really want to develop my leadership abilities, but, you know, I'm doing a lot of technical work, except early on in my career. And it sounds like for you, it worked out really well in that building your own business, you had to really develop those leadership. I mean, you didn't have a choice. You had to develop those leadership skills, and you did it. You were able to bring them back to the engineering industry. For engineers out there that are working, you know, in the early stages of their careers, they're doing a lot of reports and calculations and stuff, but they want to be that leader. You know, what would you offer to them in terms of like how they can develop those leadership skills? Because like you said, there can be a gap from like when you get into your career to getting to those leadership positions. Like, what can people do? Is there anything you can offer up to them? Any advice you could give?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really common in these heavy technical fields to be a bit introverted and also lack confidence, right? Many technical people kind of have a mindset of they got to find the problem or what's wrong, play devil's advocate. And sometimes they apply that same logic, I think, to themselves and don't have the confidence to say, hey, give me a shot at this or that or another thing. So in a technical field like engineering, I felt like I knew pretty early on that, hey, take a chance, raise your hand, be proactive. And there's just so much need for human beings that are emotionally intelligent to be in leadership roles in these technical fields that you will get opportunities. So the most important thing I think anyone can do is build the emotional intelligence toolbox on how to connect with other types of human beings, keep a level head, always take the high road, have patience, right? If you do all those things, those are really unique characteristics. If you can combine that with a confidence that, hey, give me a shot, I'll want to take a chance. I may not know how to do it today, but if you give me a chance, I will learn and do my best, take feedback and figure it out. That's the way you get opportunity. And, I think another way to say it is you've always got to be uncomfortable. I know that may not sound like fun to folks, but the only way that you grow is if you are uncomfortable, and you got to take the chances to be in those uncomfortable positions that kind of force you to grow. So it may not be for everybody, and that's okay. But for those that do want to move up, that do want to get into those leadership roles, you got to always be a little bit uncomfortable. If you're not uncomfortable, you're static in your role and you got to ask for more responsibility or look for something, raise a hand and become uncomfortable again, really. And I think that's probably the key thing when you strip it down.
I'm assuming coming from someone who does triathlons, you know what it's like to be uncomfortable.
Yes.
From time to time.
Yes.
No, but that's a great advice, right? If you're comfortable every day in what you do, you're probably not stretching yourself out enough. And I know for me as a civil engineer, when I was younger in my career, I wanted to become more of a leader. So I would just ask if I could, go along in the meetings, just watch, and sometimes I had to go at night to a planning board meeting. I wasn't getting paid for it, but, there's an investment in myself at that level. And I want to learn and I want to try these new things. It's the only way I'm going to grow and get better. And so I think that's something for those of you out there that want to become a leader. Sometimes you just have to start doing those activities or volunteering or telling your supervisor, hey, can I try this? Or can I listen in on the next meeting?
Yeah.
Right?
No.
Yeah, find a way.
Totally agree. And, you have to dovetail it too with a level of being humble and just being really patient too. I always felt that if I worked for the right organization, I shouldn't have to ask for pay raises and things like that because, a great organization should identify the value you bring to the team and provide you those opportunities. If for some reason that doesn't happen, maybe you're not working at the right place. And that's always worked for me over the course of my career. And instead, just focus on what you can control, raising your hand for opportunities, saying, I'll take on this project, I'll take on that. Even if you're not quite sure exactly how you'll do it, that's that little bit that makes you uncomfortable, that helps you grow. And then just focus on doing a really good job and working really hard. And again, if you're working for the right place, they'll give you those opportunities based upon what they see, right? So, saying that you should be proactive and uncomfortable doesn't mean you should be arrogant and say, I need X, Y, Z, I need a pay increase. That's a different thing. So I just wanted to draw the distinction there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And one other thing I'll add to this conversation is, I think sports in itself is a good outlet for people, in addition to their careers. Like I know for me, I played on a wood bat baseball team the last few years. Adding things like that into your life that are competitive, that are physical, can help you grow as a leader because you may have a leadership, like coaching your kids. Like I know they're only kids, but you're still up in front of them. You're still leading them. You're building your confidence. So I think like any aspect in life that you could build your leadership skills and build your confidence will definitely relate back to work, to when you're at work every day. And so I would kind of challenge you too to look for opportunities outside of work in your community to just start getting yourself out there more. I know my wife's an engineer too, and she's not that comfortable with it. So I told her, try to volunteer, do something at church, do something at, in this other, somewhere just to get yourself out there and get speaking. I think it's a huge confidence driver.
Totally. Yeah, you hit on almost two distinct elements, but they do dovetail together. I know for me, at some point along the journey, I felt like inside, in my own head, I had the skills, capabilities, knowledge to be in leadership roles. But I knew the one thing that was probably going to hold me back was my just terrible fear of public speaking, which is ironic because now I spend most of my days public speaking, but I needed to figure out a way to get over that. And that's kind of what you were hitting here. You've got to be, if you're passionate about it and know it's a weakness, which it is for a lot of technical folks, being a little bit more introverted many times, you've got to just put yourself in those positions where you're forced to do it. It's the only way you get comfortable and you get better at it. And that doesn't mean you lose the nerves too for folks out there thinking, oh, but I'm different and I'm more terrified, right? And I think everyone thinks that when they're in their own heads, but you always have that feeling of nervousness. Even today, if I have to give a large talk in front of a large group of people, but I can draw upon enough experience to know that this is normal. I always feel like this. This is actually part of my part of the way that I prepare. And you come to actually enjoy that because it means that you care. But deep down, you know you've done it enough times such that you don't let it get in your head and actually trip you up. You still feel it. I think a lot of folks think that people go and speak and they speak so well, they must not get nervous at all. The truth is, if you get nervous now, you will always get nervous. You'll just learn to know that that's just part of your preparation routine, and it actually doesn't impact the way that you deliver a talk or that sort of thing. So, the example for me when I realized this was I volunteered to teach for USA Triathlon, which USA Triathlon would do whole day clinics to certify coaches across the U.S. And I had really good knowledge from all the things that I had built around the coaching company and all that. Was kind of terrified to get in front of a group of 50 people and talk about it though. So I said, hey, I volunteer to do this. And I started doing them and I was so nervous, so terrified. And I just kept doing them and doing them. Ultimately, I ended up teaching 100 full day clinics, around 100 full day clinics for USA Triathlon over the course of 10 years. That totally turned around my mindset around public speaking and gave me a level of comfort that even though I feel nervous, I can deliver every time. Right. But it took a lot of repetition and a lot of being really uncomfortable early on. I just knew that was the one thing that I needed to unlock. But as soon as you do that, you gain confidence to tie together your 2 points. And I think you're right. If there's other ways you can draw confidence that you could bring into your workspace, that's a fantastic thing. So if it's through sport, you like to run, cycle, whatever, or anything else, like you do those things, they're almost small crucibles, right? That cause pain or that are difficult, that require discipline. The more you show yourself that you do those and can be relied upon, the more confidence you gain in the workplace too, right? And the public speaking example is just another example of that, right? Once you conquer it, you get more confident and it builds on itself. But you got to start, and you start by being uncomfortable, right? So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the reason I like Jesse's example so much is because it's very practical. So what I mean by that is a lot of times when you say to someone, hey, I want to be a better leader, their key answers could be like, read this book, go to this course, but get out there and speak.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, get out there and do it. Like, and then you're going to push yourself to the limit and you're just going to have to respond to it. And you're going to have to start building that confidence over and over, which is great. And, I just think that there's no other way to do it than to just do it. And like Jesse said, once you push yourself a few times, it like unlocks a little bit more each time.
You get all
and that's
confidence.
where the confidence starts to build. Yeah. And that's really the beauty of it. So, Jesse, if we were to kind of ask some of your team members to kind of maybe describe your leadership style, how do you think they'd respond to that question?
I think you'd find that they would say that I was very empathetical as a leader. At least I try to be as much as possible and logical. I try to be there in the trenches and have the sleeves rolled up with any of my direct reports or any of the teams that I work with. It's just always the approach. Put in, a ton of hard work. I want them to feel like I'm right there with them. And, I used to use this in coaching all the time, but I always wanted the athletes I coach to feel like they couldn't imagine racing or training without me by their side, really giving them guidance and helping them through it. It's the same approach in the work life when you look at your team. Does the team, when you look through their lens, what do they see? Do they see a resource there in you that they would love to just have be at their side to help them through their daily challenges and to be better leaders themselves and develop their skills? If the answer is yes, then you're probably doing the right thing. So I'm always trying to do that. I think they would also say that I am probably overly obsessed with follow through, but I do feel that, and sometimes to a fault, but I do feel one of the best ways to build trust, especially with new people that you're working with in a highly acquisitive environment like we have at Verdantas, is to just simply do what you say you're going to do. So I am pretty structured at ensuring that we follow through with what we say we're going to do. I would say those two things. One is kind of a harder edge on the follow-through piece, and then the human skills and logic and being in the trenches is more of the emotional intelligence side of things.
That's great. That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about Verdantas. He talked about the origin Verdantas, where you brought these kind of equal size companies together, 5 firms, I think it was, to create Verdantas, and you built this from there. And I want to say, what, you're around like 1,500 people now, roughly?
Yeah, a little over 1,500. You got it right.
Okay, a little over 1,500. So I know one of the things that you're very focused on, Jesse, day to day is the culture at Verdantas. And I would imagine when you're bringing 5 companies together just as a beginning point, and then you've continued to grow in different ways, that's something that really requires attention and focus to be able to build that right culture. Just maybe talk us through a little bit at a high level, what you think about and how you approach the culture at Verdantas, knowing that, you have, even though they're similar size companies, the origin has been kind of bringing people maybe with different habits and different backgrounds together.
Yeah, it's a really complicated question, right, that we get very often. And I think folks want to know, like, what's the one role or what's the one thing? But there's probably 1,000 things that haven't all come together. And that's the reality of something that's that complex and not just a technical A plus B equals C answer. So I'm going to try to hit on some of the key elements that I think are most critical to what we've been able to do. And just for full context, we are over 1,500 people today. We've done 18 acquisitions since inception, and we've been averaging about 1 a month for the last year or so. So you're right, a lot of brand new teams that are new to Verdantas, that don't know our people, that don't necessarily know the culture yet. They know their existing culture. They usually come from smaller firms between 15 people up to 300 people. That's kind of been the range of our acquisitions. And again, we like that zone because it's somewhat similar size companies. I think if we brought in a 500 or 600 person firm, that would start to change the dynamic, but it's still very much that smaller kind of mom and pop business mentality that everyone comes in with. So just wanted to set the stage. What I would say is most critical, and folks say this all the time, it starts at the top. Obviously, my role is important, but the entire C-suite needs to be totally lockstep on what we're trying to achieve as a company in terms of our vision forward, which is very much focused around our people focus, and a similar, I would say, means of emotional intelligence. I always say that I would like our C-suite, and I think this is where we are today, our C-suite's in a place where no matter which staff member came and talked to any one of us with the same question, we would all answer it a bit differently. We're human beings after all, but I would want them to leave the conversation. I think they would leave the conversation feeling the same way, meaning they felt like they were heard by the executive team, whether they agreed or disagreed with the response. They were given a logic and a fair chance, and we come off in a very supportive way. Right. So that is the most important thing as a starting point. Secondly, it's our job in the executive team. The interesting thing is we're the only folks in general, other than new hires and whatnot that occur on a daily basis, that didn't come from a legacy firm. So we have no allegiance to any one firm. Therefore, our primary job is to build an environment and a culture where trust building between team members is just inevitable. Because we all know that we unlock the power of Verdantas by collaborating. And you don't end up collaborating on real project work and bring new skills and capabilities to existing clients, relationships that you may have, until you build trust, right? We as an organization can tell everybody, work together. But nobody's going to work together in any meaningful way until there's actually trust built. So you'll find that a lot of what we do is ensuring that we set up those opportunities to build trust. So we have a lot of people programs throughout Verdantas. Sure, anyone can invest in people programs. So I don't think it's that itself, but it is an element where we are very intentional about investing a lot of time, effort, and resource into our leadership programs. We also have a lot of celebratory type programs, an internal mentorship program. We have something called Sip and Sink, where we pair random people throughout the organization to just get together and chat once a month for a half hour, one-on-one. So all of those programs that we have, that there's probably 24 of them in total, they're all set up to have an intercompany element. So we will never do anything specific to one business unit or one company. For example, our mentorship program has mentors and mentees. We purposely pair mentors and mentees from across our business from different legacy firms, right? That's just one example. Our supervisor training is another example. We do those in person because it's very meaningful. Sure, it's expensive. We have to fly everybody to one location, but we will fly people into that one location from multiple other legacy companies. So they participate in that leadership training over the course of a day or a day and a half together. They interact, they work in groups together, we go to dinner at night, right? Just another example. And the list goes on. So like I said, we've got probably 24 programs that have that cross-company element to it as an opportunity to build trust, which then unlocks, the real work togetherness in the future, which then creates hopefully more revenue because we're bringing new services to new clients, and also provides our staff new opportunities. Staff that came from a 30-person firm in a local area that was confined to local clients now is working on a big project that's across the country, and it's a great opportunity. They're meeting new people. So all that builds on itself, right? Once you get that positive momentum going, you really do unlock the potential, which makes all the acquisitions and value creation for our shareholders possible. It's actually in harmony if you invest and are patient and give it a chance, right? So,
yeah. Wow. I mean, it's just like listening to you, it all makes sense, but you can also understand the thought process and the planning that goes into this to be able to run those kind of events on a regular basis. Like you said, flying people, coordinating, picking people in different locations, right? You can see how much effort is put into it. And again, but to your point, you're building something different. And the way that you've done it has been different than the way it's been traditionally done. So in order to pull something like that off, you've got to really be thoughtful on how you can, bring people together.
I agree. And, we watch it like a hawk too. We get a question pretty often, hey, what's the target? How big is Verdantas going to get? And we truly just don't even have a target in mind. Our main purpose is to do what I just said. Create, and those are things, by the way, that every firm wants to do, right? Create opportunities for staff, make it an engaging work environment, work on new projects, connect the dots, bring more to clients. Like those are all the things that every good, healthy company wants to do. So we watch things like engagement scores. We do an annual engagement survey, and then we watch our voluntary attrition very, very closely. So we get an update on our voluntary attrition every month. And just to demonstrate how important that is to us, I want to share with you that our executive team gets an email every single time there's a resignation, a voluntary resignation. We get a specific email with who decided to resign, why they decided to resign, so that we can feel it. We want to hurt when someone leaves the organization. We just don't want to find out about it on a spreadsheet at the end of the month. We want to see the name, do what we can to try to learn from it, and perhaps even retain the person. So that's how serious we are about it. So again, our main objective here is to create something that's truly differentiated, a truly people-focused, collaborative environment that's fresh, new, and vibrant. And that's our purpose, which we're achieving right now through very rapid growth and through acquisition. But through last month, we have the lowest voluntary attrition that we've ever had as a company, even with the rapid growth. So it tells you that we're still doing, the right thing here, and it's still an exciting environment to be in. Even though I think staff in any rapidly growing company that does acquisitions always has an element of resentment when there's a headline that you've acquired a company. I've lived it, right? I've been on the other side of the table as well. So, when you look at that headline and know that there's always that knee jerk of, wow, we acquired another company, right? The main thing you need to see past the headline is, was it a great fit? Does it provide more opportunity for our staff? Does it back up our thesis? Does it back up our vision, right? As long as you see that, then people will benefit from it, and it's all good, right? If you don't get those things right and you become undisciplined in the acquisition strategy, that's where you have problems. Knowing again that the headline is always going to have a knee-jerk reaction with it.
Yeah, that's great. No, and I would imagine that like over time, if you continue to do what you've been doing and the company's growing, that the ideal response to, we acquired another company would be something like, great, more, another diverse group to collaborate with.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
I think the head, right, we're not perfect. We work hard every day, though, to be a little bit closer to perfect. But in the heads of staff, when you see acquisition, you think, well, geez, I could use a new laptop. Why are they spending money on a new acquisition? Or we don't even have this process down yet. Why are we spending time on another acquisition? So I think that's where the head goes, especially with highly technical people, when you see the headline. So again, it's like you say, it's more about looking past the headline, make sure you're doing the right thing, make sure it's providing those opportunities, and then seeing how things go with that new acquisition in terms of impact on voluntary attrition, how the voluntary attrition goes on the acquired company. And we've been fortunate that pretty much every company we've acquired has improved post-acquisition, showing that, hey, we really do provide more opportunities than what legacy firms had, right, pre-Verdantas. Like, as long as you could demonstrate those things and you watch them closely, I think that's the main focus.
That's great. Just curious, I know you opened up telling us a little bit about the thesis, which was interesting. I mean, hadn't heard to it referred like that because just hadn't had conversations around something like that. But in that thesis, obviously the thought process was to bring these different firms together, which you're doing successfully. Did the thesis go into a lot of detail on like a lot of what you just described in terms of people and matching and events, or is that something that you really had to dig into once you were up and running, kind of figuring out the recipe and thinking about mentoring programs and all these types of things? Like, how much of it was like left up to you to develop once the executive team started going?
Yeah, so the thesis from the private equity team is just very high level. It's not tactical in the operation, because usually in PE, you're dealing with folks that are educated in finance that understand perhaps market conditions and have a really good idea for the company, but not necessarily the internal specifics, right, of how to do it or how to make it come together. They usually hire an executive team, folks like myself and the rest of our team, that had experience in this specific market and doing things like that. So yeah, those tactical specifics of the programs and culture building and whatnot was definitely up to us. Although I think an element of the initial thesis, definitely after the first 5 companies were on board, was that deep-rooted people focus. And in fact, I think early on we had it right in our logo, people-focused future, which was one of the things that attracted me, because I thought, wow, if they mean that, that's a place where I could really have an impact. So that people focus was pre-baked, pretty close to being part of the thesis. And we've just been, doubling down on that and really being tactical and just trying to think that, hey, part of what's differentiated as a tailwind here is kind of social responsibility and social pressure to create an environment that is really engaging for the new generation of folks coming out of school that are getting their PEs and scientists that are getting into the marketplace. We really endeavor to create something, again, that's truly differentiated internal, that's fresh, vibrant, socially responsible, focused on environmental stewardship. These are all areas that are really attractive to the talent pool. So a huge piece of our growth and a huge piece of any firm's growth is the ability to retain talent, but then also attract talent, which is also where, Verdantas is kind of this fresh, green, new look at an old space of AEC, right? And we're truly doing it differently to attract that generation and create a differentiated culture that people just truly want to be at, right? So it's all that comes together.
Yeah, it's all about that recruit, develop, retain right now in our industry. Those are really the keys. So just a couple of the questions for you, Jesse, like around leadership. I know you've had your leadership experience at Verdantas, but also you had your athletic career, triathlon, coaching triathletes, et cetera. I know in sports, a lot of it is mental toughness, not just physical toughness, right? And I happen to think in leadership as well, like there's a lot of mental toughness that goes into it, because like you said earlier, you're going to have to push yourself, which means you're going to have to be tough enough to take feedback and do things like that. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the mental toughness side of, if you want to be a leader in the industry, right? It's not just about like, hey, I got to learn how to do something a little bit better. It's understanding that you're going to go through adversity.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's an endurance sport. There's no doubt about that. The level of patience that it takes on so many levels is difficult to articulate until you're in the shoes, right? You're going to have ups and downs that are insane. And any entrepreneur goes through those same ups and downs where you'll end one day and feel like you've got this all figured out and life is just great and business is doing great. And then other days you just feel like a complete idiot. And that sometimes oscillates by the hour. So the ability to know that that's the case and not be reactive to that is really a critical trait. The other thing is, when you're in a leadership role, you need to be that source of stability for your team. Part of being a great leader is not showing that state of instability that most humans have, right? And you need to be that stable environment so that they can oscillate around that and be there, you be there to help be that normalizing force that can kind of give third level perspective and keep kind of the even keel. If you're very reactive as a leader, your team won't know what to expect. They probably won't build as much trust. They won't be willing to share their own day-to-day struggles because they're not sure what mood you're in as a leader. So that That's one of the toughest things because you're human too. You're going to go through all the same ups and downs they do, but you really need to stay cool, calm, and collected through that to be there as kind of the rock, right, for your team. The other thing is that as you grow into larger leadership roles, and this has been said before as well, this isn't my thinking, but it does get more lonely because the interesting thing is when you're in higher level leadership roles, less people want to give you constructive feedback because they're afraid you'll judge them for what they had to say and there'll be repercussions. And at the same time, you don't get much good feedback either. So it leaves you in a place where you're wondering, am I any good? Am I doing a good job? I have no idea. Because the reason why you don't get good feedback is because people expect you to be good and they assume that you know that you're doing a good job. But again, you're human also. It's not like you're some robotic animal from the future or something like that. So that's one of the more interesting things as you increase into higher level leadership roles. It's not only the lack of constructive feedback, it's also the lack of good feedback. So it leaves you in a place sometimes wondering, which again, makes it more difficult. You need to manage through that. You need to stay patient and, things pay off. You take the high road, you have a tremendous amount of patience, which now pertains to endurance to your point, things pay off.
Yeah, like you said, it's an endurance sport. You're not in it for the short term. You're going to have to build habits up every day and stay with it for the long term. And I do think what you said is really important in that you need to, as a leader, it's helpful if you can get your team comfortable giving you that feedback, right? Sometimes you need to build them up for that. I mean, it's not easy, but it's like putting them in situations that they feel safe, I guess, in meetings. And like you said, getting them in person sometimes, going out to dinner and saying, hey, listen, I think we're all generally doing a good job, but if there's any feedback you want to give me, I want to get better. And if I'm not hearing it from you, I'm probably not hearing it from anyone. So, and I know that's not easy to do and it may not be easy for them, but I do feel like it's kind of if you get really good at leadership, you can, pull that off and get them to build their confidence, even to come back to you.
I agree. It's all about asking the right questions and how you ask the questions.
Right.
So many of these topics, and this is another one, because if you present it even in the way that you just described, hey, give me feedback. Sometimes that can be awkward and they won't be in a position to really do that. But if you just slightly tweak the question like, hey, how can I better support you? Is there one thing I can do a little bit better to better support you in your career? It's not, you see what I'm saying? It's not presented as, hey, give me feedback that I may not like. It's more like, hey, what can I do to better support you? Which means you'll get the feedback, but you didn't ask it directly. So getting creative in the way you ask questions and always remembering to ask questions first on any of these topics usually helps you open up more difficult conversations, right? Even if you're giving feedback, sometimes the best way to get feedback is to start with questions and see if you can head in the direction of the feedback from the person you're asking the question to, right?
Yeah, no, I like that. What can I do to better support you in your career? That's a great way to open that door, so to speak.
Right.
So, all right, Jesse, last question that I have for you. Just what last piece of advice would you give to, AEC professionals out there that are in that younger, 0 to 7, 0 to 10 years of their career, and they really want to get to that executive leader position one day? They want to be a high-level leader in the industry. Just any last pieces of advice that you can give them about around the long term and how they can keep striving for that goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we hit a lot of the topics here, but just be patient and, you do have to put in the work and you have to put in a lot of work. Do what you say you're going to do. If you leave this with nothing else, follow through is everything. It sounds so simple, but you can truly be differentiated in the marketplace just by simply doing what you say you're going to do. So under promise, over deliver, it couldn't be, a better phrase in this case. If you're able to under promise, over deliver, always follow through and be patient and build your emotional intelligence, you will get there. If you miss any one of those, then, you're gonna short your chances at getting there pretty quickly. And a saying I once heard, which is another good one, when nothing else works, work works, right? So people respect hard work. And, that should always be a default, right? If you get frustrated at some point, wonder why you're not getting this role or that role, just keep taking the high road, put your head down, do your work, and you will get there if you work for the right firm, right? So
I love that. When nothing else works. I'm going to tell my 3 kids that at dinner tonight.
Exactly. I remind myself periodically. But
yeah. All right. Well, Jesse Kropelnicki, CEO of Verdantas, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your very busy day to share some of your thoughts with our listeners. We really appreciate some time on the Civil Engineering CEO here.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it, Anthony, and feel free to reach out anytime. Thanks for the chat.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Jesse. I mean, he's a real energetic leader, and they're doing some awesome things at Verdantas. Please consider subscribing to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis that help engineers become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.